Dear friends, welcome. Welcome to our in-person students. So happy all of you are with us here on a Friday afternoon. Welcome to our audience over Zoom and our audience over YouTube. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you for this event. My name is Alex Cooley. I'm the current director of the Harriman Institute here at Columbia University. And we are delighted to co-sponsor this talk with Columbia Center on Global Energy Policy with our distinguished speaker, Tatiana Mitrova, who is an expert on Russian and global energy markets. And she is a non-resident fellow at the Center on Global Energy Policy. So she's in town for a few days, and we're delighted we were able to host her here for this event. She's one of the leading experts in this area. She has 25 years of experience in dealing with Russian global energy markets in many different aspects: production, transportation, demand, energy policy, market restructuring. She serves as the research director of the Skolkovo Energy Center in Moscow. And then from 2017 to 20, she was actually director of the Skolkovo Energy Center. And from 2006 to 20, she was head of the Center for International Energy Market Studies in ERI-RAS, leading the annual Global and Russian Energy Outlook up to 2040 project I think some of you are familiar with. She's a graduate of Moscow State University Economics Department, a visiting professor at the Institut d'études politiques de Paris at Sciences Po, over 200 publications in various journals, and authored or co-authored 10 books, as well as broad board experience and leadership positions in the field. Tatiana, we're absolutely honored and delighted that you're with us to talk about, I think, some of these very new and important topics here. So we'll defer to you, and then I'll just say a couple of things. During the Q&A, if you would like to type your question over Zoom into the Q&A box, I will relay those to our speaker, and YouTube, if you type those into the YouTube channel, those will be relayed to us too. And, you know, we're still figuring out the hybrid thing, so, you know, roll with us if things don't go smoothly. But in terms of substance, we couldn't be in better hands. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Alexander. It's really a great pleasure to be here finally in person. I can't believe that I am in New York today. It's like a dream. And I'm really glad to see you. Thanks for coming. For me, it's actually an illustration of this interest that this topic of energy transition and decarbonization in the former Soviet Union space has for the whole world. So the title is Former Soviet Union. To be frank, my presentation is focused on Russia because I know this subject much deeper with all the details. But if you will have questions on the other post-Soviet countries, please do ask them. And basically the story that I want to tell you, it's really evolving right now. It's very early to say what will be the outcome, but it's extremely interesting to observe how exactly it is developing. So first of all, a few facts just to remind you about the role of Russia in the global energy space. And obviously the role of former Soviet Union is even bigger if you add the other energy producing countries. So it's leading actually in total energy exports. If you put together oil, gas, coal, electricity, Russia is the largest exporter, far exceeding even Saudi Arabia, because it has everything in its export mixture. And it is competing basically with the US, Saudi Arabia in oil and gas condensate production. It is competing with the US in gas production, actually losing the first place. It is quite visible at the coal market, and even with the electricity exports, it is quite a big player. So what actually Russia and former Soviet Union countries will do with their energy sector, it will definitely affect, first of all, the whole global energy markets, but also the whole climate discussion and actually the question whether we will meet 1.5 degree target. Yeah, Russia is one of the key regions for that. you all know that for resource-rich countries such as Russia, such as Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, oil and gas production and exports are really extremely important as the key driver of their economies. For Russia, during the last few years, the numbers were changing depending on the price of oil. But basically, it is 20 to 25% of their of the country's GDP. It's from 30 to 50% of the federal budget revenues, which defines all the spendings that the country can afford. And it is 60 to 70% of total exports. So that is important. It matters. And this huge weight of energy sector in the whole economic performance, it is actually defining the way how Russia and other energy producing countries were reacting to this new paradigm of energy transition. So you remember probably these 5 stages when first it is denial, then you start to negotiate, and then you start to accept, and then you are trying to adapt. So I would say right now Russia is already on the stage of negotiations. So the previous decade, it was complete denial. And we've experienced that as Skolkovo Energy Center, we were trying to tell the expert circles, the authorities, the companies that, look guys, the world is changing and there is energy transition, and the core part of the business of Russia Inc. will be challenged. So we have to prepare for that. We have at least to take it into account. But for many years, so the answer was just, it's stupid, forget about it. The world cannot run without our oil and gas, and there will be only growing demand for these additional supplies. So you remember probably this concept of Russia as energy superpower, which was announced back in 2006 to 2008. So that is something that is still living in the minds. But it was challenged again and again, basically by the performance of the energy markets. So since 2014, 2016, there was a visible stagnation of oil demand, of gas demand. There was this period of very low oil prices and low gas prices. So there were already these signs, these test drives of how the economy will feel if there will be not such high call on Russian hydrocarbons. And of course, the last year, 2020, when suddenly everything has collapsed, basically all the markets, both volumes and prices, that has shown how vulnerable the economy is to these revenues. So that has created this, cold shower effect. And I would say that right now, even on the top levels of the decision making, both in the state and in the corporate world, I think most of the people, they recognize that, yes, there is this path of change and there are these long-term threats, but the question is now how to react to these threats and how to adapt to this new reality. And, here comes the whole question of climate change, which is, as you know, one of the key drivers of energy transition together with the technologies. And for Russia, actually, despite this denial of any role of anthropogenic emissions, which was actually articulated for many years, it has changed just recently, just a couple of years ago, even less. But for Russia, in reality, climate change is very visible, first of all, and it is happening much faster than in the rest of the world, because closer to the poles, it is ongoing faster. So in Russian Arctic, it is definitely happening much faster. And the climate damage effects They are already felt, and according to all the simulations of the scientists, they will be felt stronger and stronger, especially in the regions with permafrost, because this permafrost destabilization, it is really a very big threat. So of course there are some potentially positive outcomes, which are also discussed inside Russia, but all in all, this growing number of dangerous weather events and permafrost degradation and floodings and and forest fires, which are becoming just an incredible problem in Siberia. They are really, they start to be felt by the population, they start to be felt by the business. If you remember Nornickel case with actually destabilization of this reservoir with fuel oil, and further on it's this leakage, and huge fines that the company had to pay, which has affected its financial performance significantly. So more and more people on the ground and businesses on the ground, they start to think that it seems to be serious. It's not just something happening globally, which we do not feel. We start to feel it in our everyday life. And yes, Arctic is probably the most sensitive region in this respect. On one hand, because of its special fragility and vulnerability to all these climate changes, but on the other hand, because this is becoming the key frontier for hydrocarbons development in Russia. It is moving further and further to the north, to the Arctic region. So this is now regarded as a special big challenge for the country. And basically speaking about this perception of the climate change topic, first of all, a few numbers. So Russia is not the biggest emitter in the world, but it is quite visible on the global map. And what is interesting, that actually these old Russian exports, not only hydrocarbons, but also metals and other commodities which the country is sending to the global market, they have very high carbon footprint, one of the highest in the world. So it is a heritage of the Soviet Union. You will see the same in all the other former Soviet republics, because when the Soviet Union was developing any industry, it was never focused on energy efficiency. It was never, there was this concept of energy as a free good. Yeah, so the whole optimization was not about using it efficiently. And so therefore energy intensity is high, carbon intensity is high, and those old assets, they are still representing the core part of the industries in this part of the world. So with the world heading to net zero, with most of the countries, actually I think now it's more than 140 countries which have already announced in this or other way carbon neutrality target. This high carbon intensity is becoming a challenge to all exports, not only energy exports. Carbon border adjustment mechanism, which the European Union has announced recently, it was another strong signal for the Russian authorities and for the Russian companies to start thinking seriously about decarbonization and energy transition, because it is something which comes into force already like after tomorrow in 2025. So there is very little time left to adjust and to decarbonize, to reduce this carbon footprint. Otherwise, you'll have to pay it's not penalties, you'll have to pay the gap between the ETS price in Europe and zero price in Russia, which is questioning marginality of all these businesses. So the business suddenly became very much preoccupied with this problem. What should we do? How can we reduce our carbon footprint? Yesterday. And here we come to this really moving target, these moving parts, because formally Russia has announced very, very moderate climate obligations. So the nationally determined contribution of the Russian Federation under the Paris Agreement, which were announced actually just a year ago, in December 2020, they were about reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 30% compared to the level of 1991 by 2030. If you look at the graph, you can see that actually this target was achieved long ago for a very simple reason: collapse of the Soviet Union and the huge economic decline, which has led to like 50% reduction in GDP, 40% reduction in the industrial output. So the result was, of course, reduced carbon emissions. And already by 2017, Russia has reached 50% reduction of its carbon emissions compared to 1991. So now we are with this target of 30%, we are actually talking about growing emissions by 2030 from 50% to 70%. Yeah, which was quite contradictory and which was not actually creating any incentive for the national economy to decarbonize, because it was like granted, so we will achieve this goal without any additional effort. So right now, these goals are under discussion, and it will be very interesting to see what will actually happen in Glasgow, because just a week ago, President of the Russian Federation during the Russian Energy Week has announced that Russia is regarding net zero by 2060. If all of its forest absorption capacity will be calculated properly. It is a very important clarification, because Russia is disputing the methodology, how this absorption capacity is calculated globally, and it is arguing that actually our forests are much better, they are absorbing much more, and I suspect that to a certain extent it is a trick comparable to this one, because if you calculate the whole absorption capacity as it is proposed by the Russian Federation, you will see that all the targets are also like nearly achieved already. But anyway, it is already a strong move forward compared to this period of denial, which I mentioned. It is yet to be seen how exactly the whole regulatory framework will evolve. But if we look at the energy transition framework, so these are the key drivers of energy transition in most of the countries. Climate agenda, obviously, these decarbonization targets, new technologies developing and becoming available to generate energy in a greener way, competitiveness of the national economy, and energy security considerations, especially for energy importing countries. So these are three pillars of energy transition as International Energy Agency defines them: decarbonization, decentralization, and digitalization. So what is interesting about Russia, that actually until a week ago, decarbonization was not on the table. Decentralization, as you can imagine, in the system which has inherited this hierarchy from the Soviet Union with the central dispatching and all this stuff, it was not like mentally acceptable. So climate was not relevant. Competitiveness was provided by very cheap hydrocarbons. Energy security, again, provided by vast resources of hydrocarbons. So funny enough, until recently, the whole energy transition in Russia, it was about developing new technologies not to lag far behind the other countries, and digitalization of the energy sector, and all the allocation of the state funding, all the development of the state-controlled companies, it was targeted at decarbonization and localizing technologies. So I think it will start to change now, but at the moment, this is status quo. Uh, yeah. And if you look at the current version of the Russian energy strategy until 2035, so it is an official document which was approved actually last June, so not so long ago, you can see that it still has in mind this paradigm of growing energy exports, extensive growth, and some portion of this localization of new technologies and getting new markets. They were all about hydrogen, and hydrogen is really becoming like a new flagship project for the Russian government. Again, just a week ago, 9 trillion rubles funding was announced by the state for the hydrogen program, whatever it means. So we do not know yet how exactly it will look like, but Russia has already claimed officially that it's targeting at 20% of the global hydrogen market. So the ambition is already there. It's yet to be seen how this ambition will be fulfilled. At the same time, the whole energy balance of Russia, it is very traditional. So more than 50% comes from natural gas, and the role of renewables, it's nearly negligible. So there is hydro, there is nuclear, there is quite a bit of coal still, but renewables, they represent a very minor share. It's less than 1% of total electricity generation. I mean, solar and wind, new renewables. The plan is to achieve 4% by 2035, which doesn't seem to be really a game changer in this respect. But right now, after this announcement of the president, and again, let's see what will happen at COP26, there might be changes concerning this renewable program. I've mentioned already hydrogen program, and basically, what could be the stakes of Russia in this energy transition process? They are yet to be defined. It's yet to be all calculated. There is no plan at the moment. So for the whole governmental discussion about decarbonization and energy transition is very recent. For the first time, publicly, president has mentioned it as a new target. In the end of May this year, so it's less than half a year. But there are some obvious low-hanging fruits which will be most likely part of this solution. First of all, energy efficiency. Russia is one of the most energy-intensive countries. Again, the same applies for all post-Soviet space. It's heritage of the Soviet Union. And according to the International Energy Agency, if average OECD technologies were to be applied, Russia alone could save up to 30% of its primary energy consumption. So there is a huge loss of energy just simply due to these inefficiencies. And this potential can be utilized rather fast at rather low cost. Then, of course, renewables. Actually, I'm not sure that you know that both in terms of wind potential onshore and offshore and solar potential, Russia has the largest potential in the world. It has huge territory. That's an explanation. Yeah, but in the Arctic region, winds are strong. In the southern part of Russia, insulation is quite good. So there is a huge potential in biomass, in geothermal, in tidal, in small hydro. So basically, if this potential is utilized, Russia could become one of the important players in this market. And with the DC transmission, for example, it could also export this green electricity to the other countries. Nuclear, I'm sure you know that for Russia, nuclear is one of the leading industries enjoying state support. Rosatom is a national champion in this respect. And there are several new, very promising technologies. First of all, these next generation reactors on the fast neutrons, which are much cheaper and much safer than the current ones. And that could be also part, nuclear is not regarded as clean energy in many countries, but it is still regarded this way in the rest of the world. And for non-OECD Asian countries with growing energy demand, that could be a solution. And Rosatom is looking at these markets with huge interest. So that could be another part of like new market niche for Russia in the world of net zero. Natural gas replacing oil in the transportation sector, in the road transport, in the maritime transportation, and of course, all types of hydrogen. Gray is not that acceptable, but as a transitional could be. Blue, green, yellow, nuclear, turquoise from methane pyrolysis. So there are really lots of different solutions. And, interesting enough, most of the Russian energy companies, which I know, oil, gas, electricity companies, tech companies, they are now trying to develop their first pilot projects in hydrogen. So there is a huge hype on hydrogen in the country, and it is regarded like as a new oil. We used to export hydrogens, hydrocarbons. Now we will export carbon-free hydrocarbons. Yeah. And another important component is carbon capture, utilization, and storage. With all these depleted fields, with huge territory where not in my backyard problem doesn't exist, with all the pipelines which are in place already, actually Russia could become an important player in carbon capture and sequestration market. And of course, reforestation, natural sinks, forest offsets, so all these solutions, they are also potentially part of Russia's game in the energy transitioning world. So lots of opportunities. I still do not know what will be the final mixture and how it will be played off. But I think we are moving into very interesting times with the COP26, and well, let's watch and see how it will all evolve. So I'll stop on that and ready to answer your questions.
Oh, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. And it's wonderful to pull together our two communities who are interested in both energy policy and climate change, and of course, Russia. And so I want to take the first question actually from our chat, and this is my colleague Kimberly Martin, who's a professor in political science at Barnard College. And so she asks, are Russian enterprises, banks, or the state at all concerned about the possibility of stranded assets, of being in a future climate-related political situation where no one wants to buy their carbon-based products anymore, and no one wants to buy the infrastructure that produce them? And then she has a second question. Also, are you able to say something about Novatek's plans to develop something other than LNG in its Ob field, or its plans to develop ammonia or blue hydrogen there going forward? If so, why did this change happen early 2021? So kind of one more theoretical question, one sort of specific one.
Okay, on the theoretical question, yes, as I said, the leadership, both the political and the commercial leadership, started to recognize that there is this threat of stranded assets, that actually some of the green fields might never pay back. And so it is a completely new lens, because in the Soviet time and in the first decades of the Russian Federation, there was just one motor: expand production, and the markets will absorb everything that you will be able to propose to them. Now it is changing, and this idea that probably some of the most complicated and expensive projects will never break even, will never pay back. It is becoming more and more, pressuring on the decision makers. Some of them are trying to solve this issue with additional state support and getting additional funding to reduce the time for payback. Yeah, the others are just becoming much more cautious in choosing the projects and calculating their profitability. So yes, this factor is on the table. And basically, the answer to the second question is related to the first one. So of course, the companies are looking at the ways how to diversify their output, how to diversify their products. And I think in this respect, Novatec has not announced yet final investment decision on this blue ammonia project. But I think there was this statement by Mickelson that the company is now assessing economics, yeah, just calculating how it could work. So this project is now under analysis and under development, and I hope that quite soon we will have more clear message on it. But it's not just Novatec looking at the new products, at the new market niches, at the new technologies implementation. We made quite an interesting, I would say, research recently. I will send to you the link, so probably you would distribute it, on decarbonization of oil and gas. And the second part of this research is completely focused on what Russian oil and gas companies are actually doing to decarbonize. And I would say it was a surprise for ourselves when we were like looking at the data that actually all of them are doing something. There is still no oil and gas company in Russia which would announce net zero target. So Lukoil was saying that they are preparing to do so, but they didn't make an official statement so far. But all of them have already some projects in their pipeline. I think all companies are implementing renewables on their production sites. All of them are looking at methane emissions reduction and associated petroleum gas flaring reduction. Most of them working with the hydrogen projects, as I've mentioned, hydrogen, ammonia, so different types of hydrogen. And the reason increasing number of companies looking at CCUS, there is no single project, CCUS project in Russia at the moment, but I see that the interest is evolving and it's becoming like, I'm not sure if it will be a new hype or if it will become reality, but these new niches, they create huge interest because as in the rest of the world, oil and gas companies are trying to understand what will be their role in the energy transition, how to keep their strong margins and interest from the investor side, yeah, and what should be their product mix by 2040, 2050 to really remain key players in the market. Each company is choosing its own strategy. So some of them are more moving to electricity generation, renewables, electricity storage. The others are more looking at hydrogen and CCUS. Some of them are more interested in petrochemicals, which is also a way to transit. But I think there is no company, no oil and gas company left in Russia where strategy department wouldn't be kept awake at night thinking what the hell should we do and how can we adapt to this new reality.
Good point. Okay, let's take some from our crowd audience, and let me just ask you just to state your name and maybe the program that you're in, so Professor Mitrova knows who you are. We'll go to Kali and then Cyrus.
Hi, I'm Kali. I'm a student at the Harriman Institute, and thank you for your presentation. I was wondering what you thought the chances were that obviously down the road, Russia, like what are the chances that Russia uses the Nord Stream 2 pipeline infrastructure to transport green hydrogen to Europe? And how do you think that would affect transatlantic energy?
I think so far it's not likely. So first of all, Gazprom itself is completely refusing from this opportunity, saying that never ever it will go for that. There are some technical reasons on one hand, because actually we do not have any pipelines globally which were able to transport 100% hydrogen. So just technically how to insulate them, how to provide the safety, it is not the question which is solved already. Yeah. On the other hand, Gazprom is arguing that it doesn't make economic sense to transport hydrogen, that it's better to transport natural gas and then to convert it to hydrogen in the on the European side. And of course, Gazprom is not interested in green hydrogen, as you can imagine. Their business is natural gas, and as the next stage, that could be blue hydrogen. So here I do not think that there are any feasibility studies at the moment, or that there is any corporate or even political will to proceed with such type of project. But you see how fast the world is changing. And basically, I wouldn't exclude that in, let's say, 10, 15 years, the perceptions could change. It will be determined actually, first of all, by the European regulation, by the speed of energy transition in Europe, and also by the performance of Russia's competitors in the hydrogen market. Because everybody now is planning to export hydrogen to Europe, starting from South America, North Africa, Middle East, so everybody, Australia, I mean, sometimes very remote locations, but Europe looks as an attractive market. And whether this market will really evolve, whether there will be demand for this hydrogen, and whether there will be premium, so whether economics will work, whether business models will be in place, making it a profitable business, that will affect Russia's decision-making at all. Because as I said, this idea that probably hydrogen could become a new oil, it is already there, but nobody knows how it will play out.
Very good. Cyrus?
Yeah, hi. My name's Cyrus. I'm a energy environment major here at SEPA, also doing the Harriman certificate. We've had a chance to interact a little bit through CSIS and other forums, so great to see you in person. Thank you for coming. I have two quick questions. One is on forest sequestration, one is on gas. On forest, this sort of conflict over methodologies, over counting the amount of carbon that Russian forests sequester has been brewing for a long time. It seems like it's really going to come to a head soon, in so much as the EU is planning within the next year or so to implement this carbon border adjustment mechanism. And how much Russia pays for that will in great part be determined by its volume of carbon credits determined by forests. How do you see this playing out, this sort of methodological problem politically? Do you think Russia is kidding itself by making the argument that we should recount, revise how we count these? And if the EU sort of rejects that new methodology, what will be the consequences for Russia as you see them? Quick question on gas. You said that gas will continue to occupy something like 50% or grow to 50% of Russia's total energy mix. In part, it seems to be a calculation that not only is this something that Russia is particularly good at, but that the world is going to need gas longer than it thinks it will. I'd love your sort of take on that and your sense of where the business community of Russia stands on this. Are they realistic in their assessment of how long gas will be an important part of the global energy mix, or are they slightly overstating its likely importance?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Cyrus. Great question. So on the forests, we have to split this discussion into parts. One is Russia's NDCs and Russia's performance as a country under the framework of Paris Agreement. And there, I think this methodology will be critical. So because otherwise Russia wouldn't be able to prove that it is fulfilling its obligations. The numbers are really big, so this difference in approaches, it sums up into big difference. And I think that will be an endless dispute under the UN, umbrella. I'm not sure that it is possible to find any consensus there. So it will be just an ongoing dispute, and Russia will reinstate again and again that we are fulfilling everything if you assume the right methodology. But there is also the corporate world where people are very pragmatic, and they will be paying CBAM, and they will be dealing with their investors, and they will be explaining to their banks what is their real carbon footprint. And they cannot refer to the country level numbers. They have to show their scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 calculations. So if they are planting trees, they will have to certify how many trees they have planted and who is actually certifying these green credits that should be internationally recognized companies. Otherwise, no auditor will approve it. So they are already automatically inside this international framework. And I think they will follow global rules as they are doing with their accounting, with their sustainability reports and all this stuff. So just to distinguish these two parts. On natural gas, I mean, that's a $1 billion question. I wish I knew what will be the real global fuel mix by 2050. I think even the current situation in the markets was absolutely unexpected. Nobody thought about natural gas prices skyrocketing just in 1 year after they were at their historical lows. So we are not really that good in forecasting energy markets. And this is the key point of the Russian companies and actually governmental analysts. So there could be very different scenarios. So there could be scenario of fast transition if there is a high level of the international cooperation, mutual financial support, and so on, which we do not observe at the moment, by the way. Yeah, but theoretically that could be, and that would mean less gas, less oil, and nearly disappearing coal. But if the world is going in a more vulnerable way, if there are these regional differences, so East Asia keeps growing at a high speed and needs more and more energy and cannot actually afford to replace everything for renewables in one night, yeah, then the cheapest and the most obvious way to reduce carbon footprint would be to replace coal-fired power plants by gas-fired power plants, which means expanding gas demand. Yeah, so there is huge uncertainty, and in this uncertainty, there is potentially room for quite significant gas demand growth in the next, 20 or even 30 years. Yeah. And then we are not actually clear on the technology side. So are we really trying to achieve 100% renewables as the ideal target? Or would it be, 50% renewables plus fossil fuels with sequestration, with carbon capture and sequestration, and with hydrogen? So it's not yet decided. All these technologies are just developing. They are in the middle of their learning curves. Many of them, like hydrogen, have technology readiness level 3, 4, 5. So there is a long way to go before they will be really commercialized. And we will really understand how to integrate all this stuff in a smoothly working system. So I think it's one of the key considerations of the Russian decision makers. So please, let's wait and see approach. let's develop all these technologies. Let's learn how to work with them. Let's see how they perform and what are the real difficulties. And then we will decide. And I think this agile approach, it is actually the same in many other countries, because there is no simple solution. There is no clear answer how to go with energy transition.
Oh, that's great. So this leads to, let's go back online for a couple of follow-up questions. One on capacity. This is from Andrei Grushkin. It says, from my understanding, Russia has little to no domestic engineering capacity to develop CCUS technologies as well as commercialized blue and green hydrogen. Much of the hydrogen production right now is low scale and compartmentalized. And so he provocatively asks, is all the Russian government talk about its future output potentials pure hype and investment trends?
I think it's a mixture, to be frank. So there is definitely a lot of hype, and each time I'm looking at the next hydrogen map or next very loud statement, God, guys, there is no single pilot project of hydrogen. What are you talking about? But this, I agree that the industrial and EPC competences in Russia are really not that high, to be polite. At the same time, on the R&D side, there is still very strong engineering school. So developing technologies, this is something Russia is good in, but implementing and scaling up these technologies and assuring that the quality level, that's the problem. So I think it will not be that difficult to make a couple of pilot projects using local equipment, but it will be extremely difficult to scale them up. Yeah. So this is the breaking point. And for me, the key question is the level of international cooperation. When you're looking at the hydrogen programs and strategies of the most of the countries, they are all based on different types of consortia, because these technologies are so complicated. You have to build the whole supply chain from production to transportation and consumption side. So they all require different new technologies, and they have to be synchronized. So normally, no single company is able to do all this stuff alone. The companies are partnering in developing these supply chains. And when we are talking about hydrogen exports, it is becoming even more complicated, because you need to have companies from different countries working together and building not only the technical side, but also the whole regulatory framework, which doesn't exist at the moment. And for me, the key question is whether Russia will go for this international cooperation or whether it will try to do everything on its own. If it is the second option, then I would agree with Andrei, the chances are not that high, because moving this, this huge stone alone, I really doubt that it's possible.
Thank you. Well, your answer also feeds into my colleague Steve Sostanovich, who's a professor at SIPA's question, also online. He asks, in Europe, there's suddenly a lot of anxiety that the energy transition will give Russia new political leverage. How do you expect the current confrontation over gas exports to Europe will be resolved, and with what political impact?
Oh, these are two questions, I think. So first of all, on the geopolitical leverage. That will depend on the scale and on the level of success of Russia in playing these bets in energy transition. So if it will really become a huge exporter of green energy or huge player in the global carbon market with CCS or whatever, then theoretically, yeah, we can imagine, but it is a very theoretical discussion, and there is very long way to go there. On the current situation with the energy crisis and these enormous prices and all the fears of cold winter, I think it is a very classical hydrocarbon crisis, which has nothing to do with energy transition yet. It is actually a very good reflection of improper management of the existing markets, and I think it's really difficult to find whom to blame, because everybody were performing not in the best way. No producers, no consumers, no the governments on all sides. Plus there was this long list of coinciding unfavorable events, starting from COVID, and also with all the outages and these droughts and other factors. So at the end of the day, it will be customers which will have to pay higher bill or experience really cold days this winter. And I think it will affect the way how the carbon market, how the hydrocarbon markets will be regulated. Because this security of supply issue, and also the market manipulations, the gas trading, the level of gas in the storages, these were the things that should have been addressed, but they were not in a timely way.
Yeah, thank you. So let's go back to the audience for our questions.
Hi, my name is Baxter. I'm a first year master's student at the Harriman. So following up with a question about political leverage, one country, the relation between Russia and Kyrgyzstan, for example, several deals between the Russian government and Kyrgyzstan about energy production in the country have sort of fallen apart based on Kyrgyz perceptions of Russia and their ability to meet with those demands. So what does that say? And China seems to be picking up the slack in that regard. So what is sort of Russia's opinion on that as they start to sort of lose out on areas that they used to have more control?
That's a good question. I do not know, frankly, like the official Russian answer. I do not think that it has ever been articulated clearly. But you are right. Losing this role, this influence in the whole Central Asia region, it is quite obvious. And indeed, China is meanwhile increasing its positions. But I think it's really difficult to separate here just energy issues from the security, from the military, from religious and other topics. And I think Russia is reducing its economic involvement. Indeed, so it's buying less natural gas. It's no longer developing joint upstream projects in the region. It's not making any direct investments, basically, except for Lukoil in Uzbekistan. Basically, that's it. But at the same time, given the growing role of China, Russia is becoming automatically like a counterbalance, which is important for the countries of the region, just to keep Chinese influence somehow limited. And it is important to keep the Afghan influence limited. So probably Russia is just optimizing costs.
Yeah. And I think Baxter's point is a really good one in terms of how sometimes we in the sort of international relations and think tank community automatically interpret these moves as geopolitical and predatory, right? So when Kyrgyz Energo, I think it was bought for a symbolic amount, like $1 or something. But it's clear this isn't a revenue, clear to me, maybe I'm wrong, this isn't a profitable energy revenue generating kind of entity. On the other hand, what would it be worth? Right. So it seems to me it's very tricky to separate out these issues. What's strategic, what's profitable, what's geopolitical, what's sort of bound with other things. It's very contextual, and I think depends on the overall situation of the countries. Thank you for that. Other questions? Get someone who hasn't asked a question before we get started. Let's go to Chris.
So I'm Christopher. I'm also a Harriman student doing a master's here. And I'm a bit curious about domestic public perception on this entire transition. How in tune are Russians to this whole process? How aware are they of these like optimistic projections? And if Russia falters during this transition, how might that impact? Like, how might the public react to that?
That's a great question, and I think the society is divided. According to the public polls, even on the climate issue, there is like 50-50 division. So 50% of population says that they believe that there is anthropogenically driven climate change, and it is a threat, clear threat for them. The other 50% say it's just bullshit, forget about it.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So, and with the energy transition, it is similar. There is this polarization. So, increasing share of people, especially the younger they are, the more they are pro-climate and pro-energy transition, like elsewhere in the world, I think. So I would say students in the cities in Russia, they are really for responsible consumption. They are not dreaming about private car. They are really preferring to buy everything in second hand. So it's becoming a new culture. But at the same time, the huge part of population is saying, like, come on, what is stupid stuff? Of course, they will buy our oil and gas forever because these stupid renewables, okay, they cannot run in reliable way, so relax. Yeah, and I think it will take some time, maybe a decade or so, for people to see where it is actually heading. And again, a good example. So here, I think you have a similar division, and nobody can say what is right and what is wrong. People will just observe. But I would say that I can see very positive, in my mind, dynamics here during the last 5 years. The level of climate awareness, the level of understanding of the new energy technologies, and the positive sides, that it's not only about losing jobs in coal mining regions, but it's also about creating new high-tech jobs and about creating new value and about some very interesting business models and so on. So people slowly are getting more and more excited about that, which gives me some hope.
Okay, let's take one more from Sean. Did you want that one?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Sean. I'm a second year CEVA student, also doing the Harriman Institute program. In one of your slides, you mentioned Russia being #2 in natural gas production behind the U.S. And I'm wondering, to what extent do you see that trend of the last decade or so, the United States producing more natural gas and LNG exports as motivating a lot of this concern about the energy transition and the geopolitical impacts of that?
Well, this rivalry between the US and Russia in the gas market, I think, it's about a decade or so. So initially, Russia was very skeptical about the US shale gas, you remember, and its ability to, to be produced in an economically feasible way. Then it was very skeptical about the US LNG, whether these projects can fly at all, about their business models. Then it was complaining about the US using geopolitical leverage to force Europe to offtake these gas. So it was already quite a long story. Now it is playing the card of carbon footprint. US LNG is much more dirty than Russian gas. So, and I would say Actually, vice versa. So this is because the US LNG is playing all the time, arguing that the other gas is not clean enough. So there are many similarities, funny enough. I think that actually at the end of the day, it's about markets, not about geopolitics. Nobody can force the buyer to buy more geopolitically favorable gas wherever it is coming from, just due to the political will of this or that government. So people are paying their own money and they want to be sure that they will receive this gas, and that's it. It doesn't have country label on it. Yeah, so we are ending up with a fair competition, surprise, surprise. But what was really disappointing, though we were actually predicting it in few our papers back in 2015, 2016 here in Columbia Center on Global Energy Policy, that actually Europe, which was quite relaxed, having both Russian pipeline gas and US LNG available, yeah, finally ended up without both of them at the moment when the gas was mostly needed. So the whole market scheme actually didn't ensure timely additional supplies at acceptable cost. And this, I think, will result in not that much into the new geopolitical space, but rather in the new market drivers and market models. So I think the contracts will change because nobody would want to have repetition of this situation in Europe. So stricter contractual obligations, less ability to divert geographical destinations, maybe stricter requirements on the level of gas in the underground storages and so on and so forth. So I think Europeans will become much more preoccupied by this short to medium term security of gas supplies, because anyway, by 2030 or even by 2040, Europe will still need gas, and it cannot afford another gas crisis like this, I think.
Yeah. So I know our program says 2:30, but you have covered so much territory. So I'm going to suggest that we take one more question from Joshi, and then we will end the webinar part. And if anyone has maybe some informal questions
Yeah,
to interact
I'm saying
afterwards, we
here.
can do it
Yeah.
that way in a more kind of relaxed sort of atmosphere. So our final question.
Thank you so much for taking this question. So in previously addressing Cyrus's question, you mentioned there are two frameworks. One is more political and another is more on the corporate side. So I wonder, do you see a connection between the two? Do you see a potential for the commercial leadership to be influencing the direction of the policies on the front of energy transition?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that, yeah, to a certain extent. So Russian business is highly concentrated. There are just few oil and gas, metallurgical, chemical companies which are really influencing the game. And they are all actually included in the policy framework development. So the working groups in the ministries, they always involve representatives of these companies, and they can actually promote their position. It doesn't guarantee that it will be taken into account, but at least they have a platform where to deliver it to the decision makers. And of course, for the Russian government, it is tremendously important to protect national industry because it's the key cash generator. So it is oil and gas, mining, and metals, basically. So these are the core cash cows. And yes, I think they will be able to promote at least most of these measures. The problem is that they have also different interests. So, for example, coal companies will always vote against carbon pricing. while for the metallurgical companies, at least for the cleanest ones, for aluminum producers, for example, which are using hydropower, so their carbon footprint is low. For them, carbon pricing would be good because it would help to avoid European carbon border adjustment mechanism. Then we come to the question of the power game. Who will be more influential? Who will be stronger? To whom the big boss will actually listen? I don't know the outcome. It will be a battle under the carpet. But I think that at least certain influence of the key industrial companies will be taken into account.
Terrific. So on behalf of Columbia Center on Global Energy Policy and the Harriman Institute, thank you so much for attending in person and attending over Zoom and YouTube. And thank you, Professor Mitrova, for sharing with us your incredible expertise. And we hope we can welcome you again.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Back here on the 12th floor. It was really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.